It's longer than a jet, louder than a rocket, and yet it can vanish in plain sight. This is not just a whale. This is a living time machine, a survivor of mass extinction, a master of the deep. From underwater battles with giant squid, to haunting songs that shape entire oceans, to love stories written in waves, this is the secret life of the ocean's greatest giants like you've never seen before. The ocean holds its breath. Somewhere far below the surface, in a cathedral of shifting light and fluid silence, the womb of a titan opens. A pulse ripples through the deep. It is not the crashing cry of a predator or the groan of tectonic hunger. It is the sudden arrival of life. A calf is born, not gently, not quietly, but as if torn from the abyss itself. Out it comes, flung into a world of buoyant pressure, where gravity loosens its grip and warmth meets vast, endless dark. The newborn whale, still glistening with amniotic sheen, is already the size of a car. And yet, in the vastness of the sea, it might as well be a minnow. With a flick of instinct, the mother guides it upward. There is no time for sentiment. The newborn's lungs are still strangers to air. Above them, the surface gleams faintly like a distant dream. The mother does not wait. She nudges, pushes, and her calf, bewildered and blinking in the brine, swims with limbs it has never used in an element it has never known. Together they rise. Then it happens, the first breath. With a sound like a cannon muffled in fog, the calf explodes through the surface. Salt water blasts from its blowhole as it draws in air with a wheezing gasp. That breath is not just survival, it is transformation. In that inhale, the calf's blood learns oxygen, its brain flares awake, and its muscles receive their first orders. The ocean has accepted it. A leviathan has been awakened. But birth is only the beginning. Here, in this secret nursery of the sea, usually near warm shallows or tucked along continental shelves, the great whales begin their ancient rituals of care. No cradles, no lullabies, only tides, temperature, and teeth. The calf stays pressed to its mother's flank, its tiny eye constantly watching, learning. There is no instruction manual, but somehow it absorbs the choreography of survival. When to dive, when to surface, when to glide in her wake like a shadow clinging to its source. Every few seconds it must rise to breathe, but it doesn't just breathe, it listens. For down in the depths, even the silence hums. Whale calves quickly tune into the language of the deep, the muffled moans of distant cousins, the rhythmic throb of ocean currents, and the soft, steady sonar pings from their own kind. These are not just sounds. They are maps, alarms, lullabies, and lullabies. The ocean, it turns out, does teach, but its lessons are sung, not spoken. And what strange students these calves are. Within days, some calves weigh over 2 tons, yet still drink their mother's milk with a kind of messy urgency. That milk, thick as cottage cheese, warm and rich in fat, jets into their mouths in forceful blasts, and they slurp it like underwater vacuum cleaners. There's little elegance in whale feeding and plenty of spluttering. One might think evolution would have found a neater way for such majestic creatures to feed their young, but nature, charmingly, is full of glorious contradictions. And while the calf gorges, the mother waits. Humpback mothers, for example, do not feed while nursing. They swim thousands of miles from polar hunting grounds to tropical birthing sites, only to fast for weeks while their calf drinks the whale equivalent of a butter milkshake. Her reserves shrink, her bones peek through blubber. Yet she stays, hovering like a living fortress, ready to position herself between her calf and any threat, be it shark, orca, or curious stranger from the deep. But not all calves remain shallow. Some, especially among sperm whales, are born into dynasties of divers. Within weeks, these young ones begin mimicking their mother's descents. Down they go, into twilight waters where light fades to ink and pressure rises like a vice. At first they only manage short dips, like toddlers dipping their toes into the unknown. But each time they come back up, they're stronger. And each time they dive again, they go deeper. It's not just practice. It's memory being carved into muscle and mind. Curiously, not every calf behaves the same. Beluga babies, for instance, are born grey, not ghost white like their parents, and stay close to ice floes where their camouflage offers shelter from aerial eyes. In contrast, blue whale calves, who must grow faster than almost any creature alive, consume over 50 gallons of milk per day, ballooning in size while cruising open waters with astonishing speed for such massive creatures. It's like watching a school bus learn ballet. The diversity is staggering, but the message is the same. Survival starts with adaptation. And in the early days, there is much to adapt to. Gravity, oddly enough, is one. On land, we fight it. In water, we flirt with it. Whale calves must learn buoyancy, not just how to rise and fall, but how to glide with purpose. Breathing is another paradox. Though they live submerged, they breathe air. Time it wrong, and the calf could drown in the very element it calls home. So breathing becomes a rhythm, a ritual, a way to stitch life into every motion. But perhaps the greatest test is staying close. For in the open ocean, drifting even a few meters from the mother can mean death. Currents do not care for family ties. Predators do not ask if you're lost. Some pods solve this with constant touch, brushing fins, rubbing backs, echo-clicking reassurance. Others sing, not just for navigation, but for bonding. It's the most ancient lullaby, the voice of your kind echoing through endless water. And yet, even in these tender beginnings, the ocean holds surprises. In rare moments, other species join in. Dolphins may escort a new calf for hours, drawn by curiosity or perhaps some deeper impulse. Orcas may appear, not always as threats, but sometimes as shadowy observers, their motives unreadable. In colder waters, even curious seals have been spotted tailing mother-calf pairs, as if trying to understand their myth. But the most haunting moment comes not from predator or peer, but from the sea itself. Occasionally, a young whale will dive and not return. Perhaps it strayed too far. Perhaps a shadow waited below. Or perhaps the ocean, ever mysterious, simply claimed it. Not every calf survives. But for those that do, those that breach the surface with growing power, who sing with clearer tone, who ride the current with grace, that survival is not luck. It is legacy. Because beneath every breaching whale is a story that began here, in silence, in darkness, in the fluttering thrum of a first heartbeat, echoing against the bones of a giant. And as the mother leads her calf onward, deeper into the world's largest wilderness, the question lingers just below the surface. What kind of whale will this one become? Next, we follow where they go, across oceans, across hemispheres, into storms, into ice, into sound. For this is not just a birth, it is a beginning, and the real voyage has only just begun. The ocean, for all its wonder, is a realm without road signs. There are no borders stitched into the surf, no shimmering trail lines marking the way home. To the human eye, the sea is an ever-changing void, a restless stretch of sameness from horizon to horizon. But for whales, those drifting monarchs of the deep, this watery world is anything but blank. It is a living map, ancient and invisible, charted not with ink but with instinct, memory, and senses we have barely begun to understand. As dawn glows across the Pacific, a humpback whale breaches and crashes into the sea with a thunderous splash, an exclamation mark in the silence. It is a signal, not to others, but perhaps to itself, a moment of orientation, a recalibration of place and pulse. This whale has journeyed thousands of miles, from feeding grounds in the frigid poles to breeding waters near the equator, and it has done so without a single wrong turn. How? That question echoes louder than its songs. Beneath the surface, the answer is not written on charts or drawn by stars alone. It begins deep within the whale itself, where biology meets sorcery. Whales, like certain birds, turtles, and even bees, are magnetosensitive. Somewhere in their tissues, though the exact organ remains elusive, is a biological compass attuned to Earth's magnetic field. A grid of invisible lines pulses through the planet, faint as whispers yet ancient as time, and whales seem to read it like Braille. As continents shift and oceans swell, the whales follow these electromagnetic threads with astonishing fidelity. It's less like following a map and more like becoming one. But magnetic whispers are only part of the story. For whales don't just follow the world, they remember it. Humpbacks, in particular, possess a navigational memory so precise it borders on the absurd. Year after year, they return to the very same bay, the same estuary, even the same underwater shelf where they were once born. It is a pilgrimage not written but relived, carved into neurons like grooves in a record. These are not random destinations. They are memory-laced sanctuaries passed down through generations. A calf born near a coral reef in Tonga may one day return there, having crossed oceans and survived storms, pulled not by scent or sight, but by the silent tug of home etched into its very bones. Still, even memory and magnetism aren't enough to explain the full magic of whale navigation. Because sometimes, when storms scramble magnetics or landmarks vanish beneath rising seas, whales improvise. Recent studies hint at celestial navigation. Could whales, like ancient Polynesian voyagers, read the sky? It sounds romantic, even mythical. But scientists have observed whales surfacing at night, facing stars, moving with uncanny precision. It seems that even in the deep, the sky is never forgotten. And then there's the seafloor. It's easy to imagine the ocean as featureless, but its floor is anything but flat. Mountains rise in darkness. Trenches slice into the crust like scars. There are valleys where sound behaves strangely, chasms that funnel currents like liquid tunnels, and ridges that ring like bells under the right conditions. Whales don't just swim through this, they remember it. Some sperm whales dive along submarine canyons with deliberate familiarity, hugging contours invisible to us, like navigating by fingertips in pitch black. These aren't just feeding routes, they are landmarks in a land without light. Perhaps the most startling twist in this saga of navigation is that whales don't always travel in straight lines. In fact, many migrations zigzag, pause, or arc in sweeping curves. What looks inefficient to us is often strategic, following nutrient highways, catching warm eddies, avoiding predators, or tracking acoustic corridors where calls and echoes travel farthest. Whales listen to the sea, not just for company but for geography. And as they move, the sea itself responds. Imagine the journey of a blue whale, bigger than any creature to have ever lived, gliding through a channel in the Southern Ocean. Beneath her, krill bloom in ribbons of crimson. Ahead, a shoal of lanternfish pulses like a constellation caught underwater. Even her heartbeat, slow and thunderous, sends ripples into the ecosystem. The ocean is not just a backdrop, it's a participant in the voyage. But navigation can be cruel. Sometimes the map falters. Magnetism can shift unexpectedly during solar storms. Ocean noise from tectonic movements or volcanic activity on the seafloor can scramble acoustic cues. A whale's mind so attuned to consistency may suddenly falter, and when it does, the consequences can be heartbreaking. Entire pods have been known to beach themselves, not out of panic or sickness, but sheer miscalculation, led astray by a whisper that once meant safety and now spells doom. Yet even these tragedies reveal something profound. Whales are not guessing. They are following something so deeply woven into them that even catastrophe cannot shake its grip. And sometimes, they follow not where it's easy, but where it's necessary. Orcas, those cunning wolves of the sea, are known to use ice flows, tides, and even echoes from cliffs to coordinate complex hunts. But some pods of whales do the opposite, navigating away from danger. Grey whales, for instance, are believed to make detours spanning hundreds of miles to avoid known predator zones. These aren't just migrations, they're migrations layered with strategy, memory, and risk. And among the most haunting revelations of all is that different species seem to use different maps. A sperm whale's world is vertical, etched by pressure, shaped by darkness. A beluga's is horizontal, full of icy tunnels, echo chambers, and shifting ice ceilings. A humpback's? A blend of currents, coastlines, songs, and legacy. Each species sees a different world, and yet all find their way. In the end, it's hard not to feel a kind of awe. Not just for the distances these creatures traverse, across hemispheres, across seasons, across a lifetime, but for the invisible tools they wield. Tools we still don't fully understand. Somewhere between muscle memory and magnetic whispers, between ancestral roots and celestial signs, whales carry a kind of compass no device can replicate. It is silent, sacred, and astonishingly accurate. And it raises a chilling question. What else do they know that we do not? For as one humpback disappears beneath the silver glass surface, arcing into the mystery once more, we are left with more than admiration. We are left with wonder. Where will it go next? How will it find its way in a world with no roads, no boundaries, and no written maps? The answer lies beneath the waves, in the chapters still to come. For next, we enter the choir of the sea, where maps are not drawn with ink or muscle, but sung into being. In the underwater world, where light fades into blue oblivion and distance stretches like liquid eternity, it is not sight that rules. It is sound, and not the crashing roar of waves above, nor the hiss of shifting sand. This is a deeper music, an ancient invisible tapestry of tones, pulses, and vibrations. Here, the ocean is alive with voices we cannot see. Some roll like thunder through the water. Others are fragile as whispers. Together they form one of nature's most mystifying symphonies, the language of whales. Out in the vast Pacific, as the sun sinks into cloud-streaked water and the sea turns into a mirror of gold and ink, a lone humpback whale hovers beneath the surface, still, silent, waiting. Then, like the first note of a cello breaking a still room, it begins. A low moan slides through the water, rising, bending, fracturing into higher notes before folding back into groans. This is not random. It is not noise. This is a song, deliberate, structured, with patterns that rival a Beethoven symphony in both form and fidelity. And what's more haunting than the melody itself is that every male humpback across a region sings the same song, like a hit single passed between miles of ocean. But unlike a catchy tune stuck on repeat, this song evolves. Phrases are added, others dropped. It changes year by year, a floating chorus reshaped by collective memory. Whales do not sing for entertainment, though it's tempting to imagine them as underwater poets or lonely crooners. In truth, no one fully knows why they do it. Theories ripple like waves, territorial declarations, mating displays, group coordination, but none tell the whole story. Because here's the twist. Female humpbacks don't seem especially impressed by these songs. They don't respond with visible enthusiasm. Males, however, pay close attention. Some even seem to mimic better singers, like aquatic karaoke champions trying to up their game. It's possible the song is not a love letter to the ladies, but a vocal duel between rivals, a contest of lungs and legacy, where only the most beautiful baritone wins. But if the humpback sings in shifting melodies, the sperm whale prefers something stranger. Clicks, not gentle taps, but sharp, metallic, bone-rattling snaps fired like underwater Morse code. These are called codas, and they are not sung in smooth succession like a melody, but delivered in tightly packed bursts. Some are slow and spaced, clink, clink, clink. Others rapid staccato volleys like a machine gun in a submarine. Each pod has its own dialect, a unique acoustic fingerprint passed from mother to calf. One group might favor the 1+2 rhythm, another the 5-click roll. These patterns are consistent across oceans and generations, yet different enough to create boundaries. Submarine clans that never meet, but always recognize one another. Sperm whales aren't subtle about it either. They click so powerfully that a diver close by might feel it in their chest, as if the sound is passing through bone instead of water. And in a way, it is. These clicks don't just communicate, they also see. Sperm whales use echolocation to hunt in the abyssal deep, bouncing sound off prey and painting three-dimensional sonar portraits in complete darkness. Imagine shouting into a canyon and having the echo describe not only the cliff ahead, but also what it had for breakfast. That's the level of detail encoded in their clicks. And, in a strange twist, each whale's voice is shaped by the size and shape of the spermaceti organ in its head, meaning, quite literally, their thoughts are filtered through their architecture. Further north, under a ceiling of shifting ice and beneath a world that crunches and creaks with frost, another voice sings into the stillness. Belugas, those ghost-white marvels of the Arctic, speak with a different tongue. If the humpback is a composer and the sperm whale a Morse operator, the beluga is a canary, albeit one with a command of 100 voices. Chirps, whistles, squeals, gurgles, rasps. Their vocal range is comically broad, as though each individual carries an entire radio station inside its throat. Fishermen used to call them sea canaries, and with good reason. One beluga can produce a bubbling, giggling sound one moment, and then emit a long, mournful wail the next. But here's the twist. Belugas talk more in captivity than in the wild. Why? Possibly boredom, possibly curiosity, possibly conversation. There are stories of captive belugas mimicking human voices, even learning to imitate divers. One once produced such uncanny, garbled speech that a nearby diver mistook it for someone shouting in the water. Imagine being called by name, only to realize the voice belonged to something with flippers. And still, the sea holds secrets. Not all whale sounds are understood. Some recordings, low, groaning pulses that last for hours and stretch across hundreds of kilometers, have no known source. The famous 52 Hz whale, nicknamed the loneliest whale in the world, sings at a frequency no other species seems to use. It's neither quite a blue whale nor a fin whale, but echoes in between, calling with no answer. Is it truly alone? Or are we simply deaf to the reply? Whale communication isn't always noble or elegant either. Some species use sound to startle. The mighty fin whale produces low-frequency booms that can rumble for miles. Some orcas blast disorienting clicks during hunts, stunning squid or confusing prey. And in one of nature's most charming contradictions, mothers of newborn calves go almost silent, whispering soft grunts, using touch instead of voice, keeping their locations hidden from lurking predators. Even in the world of whales, parenting involves lots of hush-hush and sneaking around. In this grand underwater opera, every sound is a thread in a vast, sonorous web that stretches from the ice-locked poles to the equatorial shallows. And unlike our language, fixed in alphabet and syntax, whale songs evolve. They are not fossilized in dictionaries or archived in books. They change, adapt, and respond to the rhythms of migration, the moods of the sea, and perhaps even the emotional states of their singers. A sadder whale? A slower song. A competitive mating season? More complex phrases. It's as if their songs are not just tools but reflections, acoustic mirrors of the soul. So the next time you stare into the deep, remember this. Beneath the silence you hear, a chorus rages on. A civilization of voices, echoing, layering, responding. Not chaotic, not primitive, but structured, deliberate, emotional. It may be that whales have been speaking for longer than we've been standing upright. The question is not if they are talking. It is, what are they saying? And as we drift deeper into the blue, the next revelation awaits. In the twilight, where the sun dies and pressure builds, these songs give way to something darker. Not poetry, but strategy. For in the next chapter, we plunge into the abyss to witness the silent hunts of the sea's most secret predator. The sea begins to dim, not in color, but in comprehension. The sun, once a master of the surface world, now fades into irrelevance, its reach stolen inch by depth and pressure. Here begins the twilight zone, a realm where light dies and shadows grow thick enough to feel. The water turns dense, syrupy, as if the ocean is tightening its grip on anything that dares to sink too far. And still, something descends. Down, 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 past coral kingdoms and shimmering schools, past the casual grace of dolphins and the slow whirl of jellyfish chandeliers, sinks a leviathan. At over 50 feet long, it is a force that should dominate any ocean it enters. But here in this alien deep, it moves with an eerie humility. The sperm whale does not bluster or brag. It does not need to. It is hunting. Its descent is slow and silent, like a submarine ghost built from flesh and muscle. Every few minutes, a soft hiss of breath escapes its blowhole, the last trace of surface memory, before the weight of the abyss swallows it whole. Already the pressure is building, dozens of times greater than what would crush a human body. And yet the whale's bones do not snap. Its lungs collapse intentionally, a trick of evolution, flattening like deflated bags to avoid buoyancy traps. Blood shunts away from extremities to preserve core warmth. Heartbeat slows. This is no act of aggression. It is a ritual, a sacred preparation for battle. Because make no mistake, what lies below is not peaceful. It is war. The abyss is not empty. It teems with predators and prey, though few look like anything the surface has ever birthed. The realm of giant squid is one of tentacles, hooks, and inky sorcery. These creatures are not monsters from myth. They are cold, calculating carnivores, armed with barbed suckers and eyes the size of dinner plates. Eyes built for one thing, seeing what should not be seen. They hover in the black like specters, pulsing quietly in the gloom, waiting for the tremble of water or flicker of movement. And into this arena plunges the whale. It begins with sound. Not music this time, not song, but clicks, high-powered, bone-snapping bursts of sonar. The sperm whale sends out pulses that hit harder than a thunderclap in a cave. These aren't mere echoes, they are scans. Each click, shaped by the whale's immense spermaceti organ, paints a three-dimensional image in its mind. The outline of a squid, the tilt of a tentacle, the frantic flutter of fin. It can even detect the rubbery density of flesh. To the whale, darkness is irrelevant. It sees better than most creatures do with light. But the squid is no helpless victim. Some species reach 30, 40, even 50 feet in length. They do not wait to be consumed. With a flash of bioluminescence, they vanish in a cloak of ink or spiral into corkscrew escapes. Others charge straight at the whale, a tangle of limbs and suckers in defiance. One slap from those barbed arms can slice flesh. One twist can tangle a jaw. Fossilized whale teeth often bear the scars, shallow scrapes, deep gouges, etched reminders that even the victors don't leave unmarked. And yet, the whale pursues. It must. A single giant squid offers a rich reward, but a full-grown male sperm whale burns tens of thousands of calories a day. Each dive, some lasting up to 90 minutes, is a gamble. There is no room for laziness in this life. Sometimes, the whale returns to the surface victorious, dragging up limp, glistening tentacles like ribbons of defiance. Other times, it rises empty-mouthed, scarred and gasping, before plunging again into the fight. In these moments, the ocean becomes a coliseum. And the sperm whale? A gladiator, armed not with blades but with a brain. For it is not just size or sonar that sets this predator apart, it is intellect. Among the largest brains on the planet, the sperm whale's mind is a labyrinth of memory and strategy. It does not hunt blindly, it learns. It remembers which canyons hold better prey, what movements provoke which squids, and how deep is too deep before oxygen begins to betray the body. It may travel in solitude, but it is never alone in its thoughts. Then there are the pods, matriarchal clans of females and calves that use coordinated tactics to hunt smaller prey or protect their young from danger. They form protective rings, like underwater fortresses, keeping calves in the center and slapping away intruders with thunderous fluke strikes. In these groups, younger whales learn the rhythm of the deep, not through command but through observation. The abyss, it turns out, is not just a battlefield. It is a classroom. Humor, oddly, finds a way even here. On rare occasions, a sperm whale will emerge from a dive only to float motionless, vertical, like a forgotten pillar. Scientists once mistook this for death, only to realize the whale was sleeping mid-column, with one eye cracked open as if daring the abyss to interrupt its nap. In fact, sperm whales are the only known mammals that nap vertically, like great buoyant spears stabbed into the ocean's body. It's a bizarre, slightly comedic posture, but also an efficient way to conserve energy between forays into the black. The abyss, of course, has its rules, and sometimes it wins. There are squid too large, currents too strong, or hunts that drag too long. A deep dive is always a risk. When the whale is minutes from blackout, oxygen reserves low, and its body begins to convulse from carbon dioxide overload, it must rise. Fast. A vertical sprint through crushing cold, heart-hammering, with the surface like a distant promise overhead. Break through too quickly and it risks embolism. Rise too slowly and the brain starves. But when the balance is perfect, when instinct and timing align, the whale bursts through the surface with a roar of vapor, steam hissing from its blowhole like the exhale of a dragon. Each breath then is a victory. Not over the squid, not over the sea, but over the abyss itself. And when the hunt is done, when the deep is silent again and the whale glides beneath the stars, full-bellied and battle-worn, it carries the story in its skin. The sucker scars fade, but the knowledge remains. A new trench mapped, a new tactic learned, another memory etched into one of the largest brains nature ever dared to grow. But this chapter of the deep, grim and glorious as it is only one side of the whale's world. Because when the hunt is over and the calls resume and the clans reunite in warmer waters, something remarkable happens. They don't just feed, they flirt. And next, we'll ascend to a place far lighter, but no less dramatic, where massive hearts flutter, where tails slap in courtship dances, and where the sea becomes a stage for romance written in waves. The Arctic does not whisper, it crackles. The air is so cold it seems to bite, snapping with frost that sizzles against eyelashes and skin. The sea, half choked with jagged ice, moves only reluctantly beneath its glassy ceiling. Everything here feels frozen in place, suspended between silence and survival. And yet beneath this frigid stillness something stirs, a ripple, soft and deliberate, disturbing the underbelly of the ice. Then, like a breath materializing from snow itself, they appear. Belugas. White as glaciers and just as elusive, they glide through the labyrinthine channels like ghosts birthed from snowstorms. Their skin is almost indistinguishable from the fractured light above, a kind of living camouflage honed over millennia. One moment they are there, hovering beneath the frost like pale shadows. The next, they are gone, vanished into a curtain of swirling silt and whispering currents. But do not mistake their softness for fragility. These are Arctic survivors, masters of a world that punishes every mistake with silence. A pod of 20, maybe 30, slides through the water like a slow-drifting snowdrift with purpose. Mothers and calves stick close, fins brushing gently. Older bulls flank the group like quiet sentinels. Their path is not random. Beneath the ceiling of ice, where light refracts into kaleidoscopic shafts, the belugas are navigating an invisible maze, an obstacle course of frozen roofs and vanishing doors. Breathing holes shift daily. Some seal with ice within hours. Others drift with the current, hidden under thick crusts of snow. To survive, belugas must remember where the last pocket of air was and where the next one will be. They do not guess. They listen. With heads bulbous and expressive, belugas use echolocation like a sixth sense. Clicking, chirping, trilling. They broadcast sound in every direction, sculpting the underwater world with echoes. A single click can bounce off an overhang of ice, a rock shelf, or the faintest thinning of the frozen ceiling above. These echoes return, painting mental maps in exquisite resolution. Some researchers believe a beluga could detect a ping-pong ball in complete darkness, an absurd but oddly charming benchmark of sonar precision. It's not just remarkable, it's essential. In a realm where light cannot be trusted and air is a fading promise, sonar is salvation. And it's not just the topography they're reading. The belugas are listening to each other, dozens of conversations humming at once in frequencies most ears will never know. Each individual has a voice, a signature tone, recognizable by others. Mothers and calves share calls like lullabies. Males squawk and chirp in what might be displays of bravado or low-stakes debates about navigation. Scientists describe their soundscape as a symphony of whistles, gurgles and warbles. Less whale song, more alien jazz band. One moment it's comedic, the next haunting. If humpbacks are composers and sperm whales are drummers, belugas are the Arctic's improvisational geniuses. Yet even with their sonar and songs, the sea is not always kind. Sometimes the ice traps them. In late winter, when sudden cold snaps harden vast stretches of the Arctic Sea overnight, belugas can find themselves stranded, cut off from breathing holes with no surface access. Some will bash at the ice over and over, bruising their heads to reopen a passage. Others suffocate quietly beneath the surface, lost in a skyless world with no exits. Entire pods have perished this way, entombed beneath the very ice that once protected them. It's a grim reminder that the same camouflage that makes them invisible can also become their prison. And yet their charm never fades. Watch them from beneath, and you'll see not just precision, but play. Belugas are one of the few whale species that seem to enjoy the absurdity of existence. They rub their backs against gravel beds like itchy toddlers, chase one another through underwater tunnels like mischievous sprites, and sometimes just float, upside down, eyes half closed, as if meditating on some secret Arctic joke. Their faces, with their subtle smile curves and squinting eyes, give them a disarmingly human aura. It's difficult not to anthropomorphize, but perhaps it's not projection. Perhaps they really are enjoying themselves. And their intelligence suggests as much. Belugas, like dolphins, can solve problems, mimic human voices, and remember tasks over long periods. Some have even been observed using tools, pushing objects with their flippers or playing with bubbles like underwater hula hoops. In captivity, they are notorious escape artists, often exploring every bolt and hinge of their enclosures with alarming patience. In the wild, this cleverness translates into cunning. Belugas will cooperatively herd schools of fish into tight balls before lunging together. Others wait near river mouths during spawning seasons, timing their ambushes with tidal pulses. Arctic ghosts they may be, but simple? Never. And their lives are steeped in history older than ice. Long before modern science gave them nicknames, Arctic peoples revered belugas as kin. In Inuit legends, they were spirits of the sea, shapeshifters, or messengers from another realm. Some tales speak of belugas turning into humans, walking on land in the skin of whales. Others say their songs hold the wisdom of ancestors, passed between pods like drifting chants. Even today, indigenous hunters speak of their uncanny awareness, how a beluga can sense a boat miles away, or change course just as a harpoon is readied. Whether folklore or fact, the result is the same. The beluga is not just a whale, it is a presence, Yet for all their mystique, they are not invulnerable. Polar bears patrol the ice from above. Orcas hunt from below, taking advantage of open leads and surfacing gaps. Belugas have learned to avoid both, often by hiding in rivers and shallows too tight for their enemies. And here's a twist. Their white color, once thought purely for camouflage, may also play a social role. In groups, their brightness helps them track each other against the dark seafloor, like moving stars in reverse. It's an ironic duality, too white for predators to ignore, but just right for family to find you. When spring arrives and the ice begins to fracture, the belugas migrate, not always far, but with intent. Some move inland, following rivers into estuaries where food pulses in new abundance. Others remain offshore, floating in the emerald thaw like balloons that forgot how to rise. And still they talk. Even in the shallows where the water warms and the light returns, the chirps continue. A mother coos to her calf. Youngsters squabble playfully. Old bulls rumble low and slow like ghosts clearing their throats. Their voices never stop. Because for belugas, sound is not a tool, it is identity. And as the Arctic sky glows with the impossible colors of northern light, and the ice recedes into glittering shards, the belugas vanish once more, not into emptiness, but into a different realm. A sea still wild, still sharp, still filled with songs no human ear will ever fully translate. Next, we leave the hush of the Arctic for something louder, larger and more thunderous, where weight becomes weapon and speed surprises the calm. For in the next chapter, the biggest animal on Earth does something unexpected. It charges. The sea lies calm, its surface painted in polished silver by the rising sun. The waves barely whisper. Gulls hang in the air like punctuation marks, suspended in a morning too still to stir drama. But down below, far beneath this peaceful veneer, the water is heaving. Not in currents, not in storms, but in something far more immense. Something ancient. Something waking. From the cobalt depths, a shape begins to rise, slowly at first, like a continent being born again. It is not one creature, but two. Twin mountains of muscle and momentum. They rise not vertically, like breaches we've grown used to, but horizontally, like torpedoes turned toward each other in some colossal underwater joust. Blue whales, each longer than a subway train, heavier than a Boeing 757, are preparing to charge. It seems implausible. We imagine blue whales as gentle giants, meandering plankton sifters cruising in slow motion. And for most of their lives, they are. But nature has a habit of giving its titans a secret, and this one is theirs. When the moment demands it, the blue whale becomes a juggernaut. The trigger is often invisible to us, an imperceptible shift in song, a hormonal surge, a flash of pheromone through a plume of seawater. Somewhere nearby, a female has surfaced, and with her, the ocean's slow ballet turns into a thundering race. Males, who moments ago seemed adrift in lazy meditation, now snap into action with a force that beggars belief. Their tails carve trenches through the water, pressure waves billow out like tsunamis wrapped in silk, and soon, the largest animals on Earth are moving at speeds that defy logic, up to 25 miles per hour, driven by nothing more than muscle, momentum, and desire. The competition is called a heat run, a deceptively innocent phrase for what is, essentially, the world's most epic slow-motion demolition derby. It begins with distance. The female leads, swimming just fast enough to tempt, just slow enough to taunt. Behind her, the males gather in a line, a convoy of floating freight trains, each determined to outlast, outswim, or outmuscle the rest. But there's no elegance here. This is not ballet, it's attrition. As they race, the sea trembles. Water churns white beneath their flukes. Each breath, a geyser of vapor shot skyward, marks their position like smoke signals in war. Sometimes two males will veer toward one another, their massive flanks slamming in a soundless collision beneath the surface. No claws, no fangs, just raw weight. Bone against bone. Scars from these collisions are often visible. Scrapes along the back, torn fluke edges, battered dorsal ridges. For a creature with no natural predator, this is as close as blue whales come to battle. But their power isn't just in brute force. There's strategy too. Some males will draft behind others, using the slipstream to conserve energy before surging ahead at the last moment. Others will rise slightly, surfacing sooner, hoping the female chooses the one most visible, most persistent. Every lunge, every dive is a gamble, and there is no second place. When the female finally chooses, perhaps with a subtle tilt of her body or a slowing of pace, the rest are dismissed without ceremony. Weeks of fasting, hundreds of kilometers of pursuit, all for a shrug of the sea. And yet, the real twist is not in the speed or scale of the chase. It is in how little we still understand about it. No scientist has ever fully decoded what makes one male more successful than another. Size matters, but not always. Endurance plays a role, but some of the victors are younger, leaner. Perhaps it's song. Blues are known to emit deep, resonant pulses that can travel hundreds of kilometers. Perhaps it's posture, or timing, or some hidden code written in vibration, unreadable by human senses. Whatever it is, the female knows. And once she chooses, the chaos ends. Males fall away, not with a fight, but with grace, peeling back into the blue like titanic leaves drifting from a submerged tree. The victor remains, swimming close, sometimes touching her side with his massive pectoral fin, barely brushing, yet enough to send ripples through 1,000 tons of flesh. Mating itself is brief, awkward, often hidden deep beneath the waves. And yet it is the culmination of an event as grand, as physically demanding, as any migration on Earth. But even outside of mating rituals, blue whales defy expectation with motion. At feeding grounds, they can accelerate from drift to drive in seconds, opening jaws that expand like parachutes to engulf entire clouds of krill. The force required to do this is enormous. Every lunge a combination of timing, positioning, and biomechanical coordination that rivals any land predator's sprint. And if they miss, they circle, adjust, and try again, like torpedoes with patience. The irony, of course, is that these are creatures of finesse just as much as force. Their water, even their breath, which can reach over 9 meters high, often catches the light like liquid fire. They are athletes with the grace of poets, and humor. Nature never forgets it. Young blue whales have been seen chasing each other in slow circles, nudging with snouts like children in bumper boats, occasionally misjudging distances and colliding with the gentleness of giant toddlers. Once, a blue whale calf was spotted attempting to lunge feed on a floating mat of seaweed, its instinct leaping ahead of its wisdom. Another time, a juvenile misjudged a school of fast-moving fish, charging at them with such enthusiasm that it flopped sideways in mid-lunge and came up with an accidental nose full of jellyfish. Dignity, it seems, is not always guaranteed, even for Earth's largest animal. But beneath the charm, the drama, and the thunderous elegance lies something sobering: fragility. A blue whale's heart, massive as a piano, beats only 5 times per minute when diving. Its arteries are wide enough for a small child to crawl through. And yet, despite their size and power, their survival is stitched together by delicate threads: timing, food supply, migration cues, social contact. Miss just one of these, and the rhythm falters. Still they move, still they race, still they charge. Because that is the essence of the blue whale, not merely to exist, but to move with purpose, even if that purpose is mysterious to us. Whether lunging into krill clouds or thundering through ocean chases that leave scars on skin and legends in water, they remind us that power at its best is never static. And next, we'll leave the world of ocean collisions behind and enter one shaped by longing, choreography, and sonic seduction, where flukes become flirtations and voices shape desire. The stage is set, the dancers are ready. Courtship is calling. The ocean is not known for subtlety. It crashes, roars, churns, devours. But beneath the thunder, beneath the blue-gray violence of the waves, there are moments when the sea blushes, when it sighs instead of screams, when power gives way to poise. And in these rare hours, often just as the sun slips low and the water glows like melted copper, romance begins. Not with perfume, not with flowers, but with movement, song, and the impossible elegance of creatures who outweigh trucks and yet court like ballerinas. The humpback is the master of this strange aquatic ballet. He begins his overture with a song slow and haunting, layered with notes that dip, rise, stutter, and moan. No orchestra on land can match its reach. These melodies, structured with mathematical precision, can carry across entire ocean basins. To us, they are mournful and otherworldly. To the females listening nearby, they are auditions, Each male a composer vying for a hearing, each phrase a gamble. But the twist? The audience often doesn't react. Females do not approach with fanfare or applause. The males sing into the vast, indifferent blue, not knowing if anyone listens. And yet they continue. Hours, days, sometimes weeks. This is not hopelessness, it is ritual. It is hope set to melody. But the song is only one movement in this performance. The real dance begins when two, or sometimes a dozen males, sense a receptive female. What follows is something between a ballet and a bar fight. They don't clash with claws or fangs, but they do not hold back either. The males lunge, chase and flank. They dive beneath one another to cut each other off. They slap their tails like gavel strikes, send up fountains of white spray with each thunderous breach, and sometimes, in particularly passionate duels, ram each other with enough force to ripple through the ocean like a drumbeat. The female, she swims ahead, gracefully, patiently, with the disarming calm of someone auditioning bodyguards by letting them knock each other senseless. Yet courtship isn't all brute showmanship. Sometimes it is choreography so precise it defies explanation. Two whales, male and female, may begin to circle, not in aggression, but in a hypnotic spiral, their pectoral fins barely touching, their movements synchronized like a dance practiced over lifetimes. They rise and fall together, spinning in wide, slow arcs that mimic the Earth's own tides. These rituals can last hours, with no mating, no climax, just motion, just connection. Scientists call it escorting, a vague term for something that looks far more like courtship's slow burn, the getting-to-know-you phase of the deep. And not all species flirt in the open. Down in darker waters, where the sunlight wanes and the silence stretches longer, beaked whales perform a subtler romance. Little is known about their courtship, but occasional glimpses reveal complex, almost shy interactions. Males displaying battle-scarred tusks in soft confrontation. Females responding with rolls and flutters rather than flight. Unlike humpbacks, they don't sing symphonies. Their communication is short, sharp, clicks that encode status, intention, proximity. It's a minimalist love song, like poetry written in Morse code. Even sperm whales, the deep-diving titans of the abyss, are not immune to the ocean's romantic pull. Males, after years of solitary wandering through the polar seas, return to tropical waters to mate. These bulls, sometimes 50 tons in mass, approach groups of females not with aggression, but with patience. They hover, observing, sometimes staying for days. They seem to have preferences, returning to the same females over years, guarding calves that may or may not be their own. In a world where everything drifts, bonds like these are unexpected and oddly touching. Of course, not all whale romance is monogamous, far from it. Some species operate more like speed daters than soulmates. A female blue whale may attract a dozen males, all of whom compete in a kind of desperate marathon of endurance and strength. But once mating is complete, the group dissolves. The winner swims on, and the female is left alone to gestate and birth a calf the size of a minibus. Romance in this case is swift and transactional, but the lead-up, the chase, remains one of the ocean's most explosive displays of energy and obsession. And even here there is humor. Juvenile males, still too young to win battles or impress with song, often shadow the older ones. Some even mimic mating behavior with each other, or drift awkwardly alongside females, trying out their first courtship spins with all the charm of teenagers at their first dance. There's something endearingly clumsy about it. The massive flipper raised too early, the spiral a bit off balance, the hopeful whistle pitched just a touch too shrill. But through these missteps they learn. And someday, one of them will be the voice that fills the ocean. The fin that earns a spiral. It's also worth noting that whales, unlike many terrestrial animals, use their entire bodies in courtship. A male may stroke a female with his pectoral fins, nudge gently with his rostrum, or even roll onto his back in submission, a rare act in the wild, and one that signals trust. Females, for their part, are not passive. They often test males, diving suddenly or changing direction, as if saying, "Prove you can keep up." It is a test of fitness, yes, but also of timing, awareness, and the kind of connection that transcends brute strength. And when two whales finally mate, it is brief, just seconds in a vast exchange that might have taken hours or days to orchestrate. There is no ceremony, no public confirmation, just a soft parting of tails as the moment ends. and each drifts once more into the blue. But the consequences of that encounter echo for decades. A calf may be born thousands of miles from where the dance began, nurtured in warm shallows by a mother who remembers the spiral, the touch, the song. Some whales never meet again, others, it seems, do. In a few species, pairs have been spotted together across seasons, across migrations. Are these lifelong mates, or simply familiar travelers crossing paths once more in the endless swirl of salt and tide? Science does not always have the answers, but the ocean doesn't always need them. Because what becomes clear in the gentle collisions of flukes and the poetry of sonar pulses is that romance in the sea is not just biology. It is expression. It is performance. It is desire written in movement and vibration, in ritual and risk. And it is all happening in silence to us, but in symphony to them. Next, we'll follow what comes after romance, the politics of pod life. Loyalty, deception, teamwork, and strategy. Because beneath the beauty of the dance lies something far more calculated, the code of the pod. The surface of the sea is still again, but beneath it, something stirs. Not a single giant drifting alone through the blue, but an entire society in motion. There is no hierarchy of skyscrapers here, no buzzing marketplaces, no traffic-jammed roads. But don't let the lack of buildings fool you. This ocean is alive with cities, not of stone but of sound, not of walls but of movement. And at the heart of them all are the pods. Whale families bound not by fences or front doors, but by loyalty, memory, and a shared rhythm written into the water itself. In a wide, shallow bay somewhere off the coast of Patagonia, a group of southern right whales glides through the emerald tide, flukes barely disturbing the glassy surface. To the untrained eye, they seem casual, even lazy. A slow arc of a back here, a puff of breath there. But a closer look reveals choreography. The mother adjusting her speed for her calf, another female slipping into a parallel path, an older whale taking the rear, scanning the water with a kind of unspoken vigilance. This is no random assembly. It is formation, a social unit with unwritten laws. Among whales, society is more than simple grouping, it is strategy. And in some species, like orca, it becomes theater. Killer whales, those tuxedoed tacticians of the sea, live in pods that resemble tight-knit clans, ruled not by brute force, but by matriarchal wisdom. Grandmothers are not just respected, they are indispensable. In lean years, when fish vanish and storms stretch longer than usual, pods with older females are more likely to survive. Why? Because she remembers which fjords stay warm in cold years, which estuaries pulse with spawning herring, which paths lead to prey and which lead to empty water. Her mind is not just a memory, it's a map, a living library passed down in motion and tone. And her role does not end with direction. Within these pods, calves are rarely the sole concern of their mothers. There are babysitters, other females who help guide, teach, and even discipline young ones. A calf may play too rough, dart too far, chase a jellyfish with too much zeal, and a gentle nip from an aunt reminds it of boundaries. The result is an upbringing built on cooperation. If whales wrote parenting guides, they'd be about collective raising, not solitary burden. But the pod is not all affection and lullabies. There are politics here too, rivalries that simmer, alliances that shift, and battles of influence not fought with violence but with presence. Among sperm whales, for instance, young males eventually leave the pod and venture into the wide, cold world, joining bachelor groups or roaming alone through abyssal plains. But the females remain, weaving intricate social tapestries. They gather in units, often tied together for decades. Some are closer than others. They share food, echo each other's calls, even sync their diving patterns. But should one become too aggressive or too independent, subtle distance may form. Whales, it seems, can ghost each other just as quietly as humans do, and nowhere is their collective strategy more visible than in the hunt. Watch a pod of transient orcas hunt seals along an icy shoreline, and you might forget you're watching animals. They scout from a distance. They spread out like a net. One slips beneath the ice shelf, tapping gently to dislodge the seal above. Another flanks from the side, herding the panic. A third waits perfectly still, calculating the escape path. Then, splash, thrash, silence. It is over. The kill is swift, almost surgical. And moments later, the family shares. Calves nibble, adults distribute. It is brutal, yes, but efficient and oddly civil. In warmer waters, strategy looks different. Pilot whales, with their bulbous heads and deep family bonds, engage in group dives for squid, coordinating echolocation in layered patterns. One group pulses clicks downward, probing the dark. Another listens from the sides. They dive in waves, rotating who goes deepest, who comes up first. No one leads outright, yet everyone plays a role. It is symphonic hunting, no conductor, just players who know the tune. And their communication, though largely inaudible to us, is constant, not just for navigation, but for mood, reassurance, negotiation. One whale chirps, another responds with a whistle. A third joins in with a burst of low-frequency pulses. These aren't random. They are statements, queries, signals of play or warning. In some species, like orcas, dialects even form. One pod's voice can be as distinct as a regional accent. Scientists have identified dozens, some melodic, others clipped, a few hauntingly complex. If you removed the water and replaced it with air, you'd think you were listening to an entirely alien language. Perhaps you would be. But social intelligence is more than communication. It's timing, it's restraint, and its adaptability. Take grey whales, known for their long migrations and solitary streaks. Yet in breeding lagoons they form temporary alliances, often with unexpected dynamics. One female may allow a male to escort her, warding off others, but days later she may switch. Sometimes two males collaborate to guard a female from a third, only to compete moments later when she signals receptiveness. The fluidity of these arrangements defies easy explanation, hinting at a social playbook we've only just begun to read. And yet, for all this coordination, for all the strategic mastery, there is still room for humor. A young calf breaking formation to chase a drifting feather. A pod of dolphins crashing a sperm whale gathering like uninvited comedians, mimicking their slow movements before darting off in bursts of laughter-shaped squeals. Even among giants there is mischief. But make no mistake, this is not chaos. These moments of levity are built into the code. The pod is not a military unit. It is a family, one that dances, jokes, remembers. It adapts not just to survive, but to grow. And in this, it mirrors something deeply familiar. Because beneath the barnacle-crusted backs and cavernous lungs, these whales are practicing something humans often struggle with: living together with purpose. And just when it feels like we've begun to understand their dynamics, a deeper question surfaces. Not how whales live in pods, but how they vanish in them. For in the next chapter, we follow the ocean's greatest illusionists. Giants who disappear in plain sight, slip past predators with phantom grace, and teach us that in the ocean the boldest survival strategy of all might be silence. At first glance, the open ocean seems like a place with no secrets, a flat infinity of rolling blue, too bare to hide anything larger than a drifting jellyfish. The horizon yawns in every direction, unbroken, uncluttered. And yet, something is always missing. You feel it before you see it, the eerie sensation that something enormous is out there, just beyond vision, just beyond sound. Because in this boundless expanse, where even shadows have trouble forming, some of the largest creatures on Earth have perfected an art more often associated with insects and illusions, disappearing. Whales, with their cathedral-sized bodies and thunderous lungs, should be impossible to miss. A blue whale is longer than a city bus and heavier than a jetliner. A sperm whale's breath echoes like a cannon. Even a pod of smaller pilot whales can churn the sea into a foam-white bloom when moving in concert. And yet, hour after hour, day after day, ships cross their migratory lanes without so much as a glimpse. Entire research teams wait, sonar pinging, hydrophones straining, only to be greeted by silence. Not because the whales are absent, but because the whales are hiding. It begins with behavior, not biology. Whales, for all their grandeur, are masters of minimalism when they want to be. Their breaths, often mistaken for drama, are actually precise acts of economy. A surfacing whale exhales and inhales in seconds, quick, efficient, then gone. Some species even exhale below the surface to avoid that telltale spout of mist. Others dive at oblique angles to mask their splash, slipping beneath without rippling the skin of the sea. To the untrained eye, the ocean remains undisturbed. The whale was never there. But the real vanishing act begins below. Imagine a sperm whale drifting silently at 1,000 meters depth, motionless as a monument, heart slowed to conserve oxygen. Its silhouette, normally sharp and solid, is blurred by thermal gradients and flickering particles. Its skin, often marked by pale scars and crater-like calluses, reflects light in broken patterns that blend with the dappled twilight. Down here, color means little. There is no blue, no red, only hues of gray and dark. The whale is not so much invisible as indistinct, like a forgotten shadow clinging to the contours of a trench. And some whales take stealth even further. Orcas, for example, are predators of uncommon intelligence, and that makes other whales equally inventive prey. A mother gray whale migrating with her calf along the Pacific coast knows that orcas are listening. She doesn't just swim quietly. She travels close to the shoreline, where kelp forests disrupt sonar and underwater geography muffles movement. When orcas are near, she may even push her calf into shallow surf, where their size becomes a disadvantage to any attacker trying to maneuver through breakers. In one recorded encounter, a gray whale used her own body to wedge between her calf and the predators, not with panic, but with surgical precision, knowing every second bought mattered. Here, strategy becomes camouflage. But perhaps the most surreal disguise comes not from terrain or timing, but from tools. Some whales use bubbles, not as playthings but as smokescreens. Humpbacks are known for their bubble nets, designed to corral fish, but those same spiraling clouds of froth can also confuse predators, disorienting vision and sound alike. In confrontations with orcas, bubbles have been observed trailing from fleeing whales, bursts of white chaos clouding the water like an underwater flare. Against a coordinated ambush, it's not brute strength that wins, it's distraction. And just when you think the ocean has run out of surprises, along comes the beaked whale, an animal so secretive that entire species have been discovered only after washing ashore. These deep-diving enigmas can remain submerged for over 3 hours, often descending past 2,000 meters and rising again miles from where they began. Their dives follow no predictable arcs. They slip between sonar layers, hugging the acoustic shadows of seafloor ridges and thermal boundaries. To military-grade equipment, they are phantoms. To science, they are still largely question marks, and to predators, they are ghosts that pass through the deep without a trace. But the paradox of whale stealth isn't just biological, it's behavioral. Not all whales disappear out of fear. Sometimes it's for advantage. Blue whales, during feeding, use silence as a hunting tool. When krill swarms sense vibration, they scatter. But a silent approach, slow, angled, barely disturbing the current, lets the whale arrive before the prey reacts. A single lunge performed from below with mouth agape can scoop up hundreds of thousands of tiny crustaceans in a single gliding surge. For a moment, the blue whale becomes not a blundering giant, but a precision predator, cloaked in quiet. Even socially, whales use disappearance tactically. A pod of orcas might split, fragmenting their soundscape so that a target pod misjudges their numbers. A solitary male humpback may stop singing entirely, then reappear days later in a different region, his silence a deliberate break from the competitive chorus. Among whales, absence isn't just mystery, it's message. And then there are the accidents, the times when whales vanish not by choice, but by misfortune. A misaligned dive sends a whale into sonar-heavy waters. A lost calf follows the wrong current and ends up separated by miles. These disappearances sting not just for their tragedy, but because they remind us how fragile the illusion of size is. In the open sea, being large doesn't make you visible. It just makes you vulnerable in grander proportions. Yet for all the stealth and camouflage, the ocean occasionally lifts the veil. A fin breaks the surface. A shadow ripples beneath a kayak. A misty exhale hisses like a ghost from a forgotten century. And in that fleeting glimpse, you understand the power of absence. The whale was always there. It was watching, listening, waiting. And so the giants remain, hidden in plain sight, drifting just below knowing, always one dive away from vanishing. But sometimes, the ocean won't let them hide. Sometimes it calls them out, draws them toward oases, toward gatherings, toward the primal tug of survival. In the final chapter, we journey through their timeline, through a history measured in tides and heartbeats. For these are not merely creatures of the moment. They are ancient bloodlines carried across epochs, survivors of extinction, masters of evolution, and whisperers of the sea's deepest past. The story at last begins at the beginning. Before the sea cradled their song, Before the oceans sculpted their shape, whales walked, not gracefully, not grandly, but awkwardly, on four stubby legs, padding through tropical forests beside rivers that no longer exist, under skies that glowed with the heat of a younger Earth. Their ancestors, creatures like Pachycetus, were more dog than leviathan, more curious than king. They sniffed the shoreline with wet snouts and peered into water not as a home, but as an unknown. And yet, that first cautious step into the shallows would begin one of evolution's most dramatic metamorphoses, one that would unravel over 50 million years, molecule by molecule, into giants. The story of whales is not a straight line, but a spiral, a deep coil of adaptation and reinvention. Their early forms, like Ambulocetus, waddled and swam, half caught between two worlds, land-bound lungs above, flippered limbs below. They were not yet whales, not truly, but the blueprint was there. Over time, bones reshaped. Nostrils migrated backward to form blowholes. Back legs shrunk, then vanished. Their ears, once tuned to the rustle of jungle leaves, recalibrated to echo underwater. What emerged from this alchemy was no longer a land dweller, but a sea dweller reborn. A mammal who abandoned gravity and embraced pressure. Not because it had to, but because it could. By the time Basilosaurus ruled the oceans, a 60-foot serpent of a whale with jaws like a crocodile, the transition was complete. And yet, this was still just the opening act. Because while dinosaurs had vanished in fire and ash, these mammals were quietly building an empire of their own, learning the ocean not through domination, but through endurance. They've seen it all since. Ice ages that turned seas into mirrors of frost. Super predators like Megalodon whose teeth rivaled steak knives. Continents that drifted, rose, cracked and reformed beneath them. Through every upheaval, whales adapted. They grew larger, not out of arrogance but efficiency. In the deep, size conserves heat. Large lungs store more oxygen. Bulk travels farther on less energy. The blue whale, today the largest animal to have ever existed, even bigger than the mightiest dinosaur, was not born from chaos. It was refined by time. But size, for all its wonder, is only part of the secret. Hidden in whale DNA are traces of their terrestrial past, tiny vestigial bones near their hips, the last whisper of lost limbs. Some still have hair as calves, a brief nod to their land-based ancestors. Others have genes for olfaction, smell, switched off, remnants of a sense left behind on land. Evolution doesn't erase, it layers. And in whales, those layers tell stories. Take the sperm whale, for instance. Sperm whale. Inside its head is the largest brain of any creature on Earth, 6 times heavier than ours, encased in a block of oil called the spermaceti organ. It may help with sonar, or buoyancy, or perhaps something we haven't guessed yet. Even now, scientists puzzle over its purpose. But whatever the answer, it points to the real genius of whales: mystery as adaptation. They don't need to be fully understood to thrive. Perhaps that's the point. And then there's their language. Unwritten, yet precise. Clicks, whistles, songs that change with the season. A humpback's melody in one year may be utterly different the next, as if they've decided collectively to compose a new score. It's culture, not just communication. Transmission of ideas across generations, not via genes but through behavior. Orcas do it with hunting strategies. Sperm whales do it with dialects. Belugas do it with social games and mimicry. These aren't just animals reacting to instinct. They're communities adapting through time, living memory flowing through bloodlines older than our own civilizations. And through it all, they've endured without claws, without venom, without armored hides. They've done it through cooperation, intelligence, migration, and a pace of life that moves like the tide, slow, purposeful, and unyielding. Their longevity isn't just survival, it's resilience redefined. Some bowhead whales alive today may have been born before the invention of the light bulb. They swim through Arctic waters with harpoon tips embedded in their bones, relics of a century past, carrying not just scars, but stories. And now, they carry something more, the weight of the future. Because while this chapter is rooted in ancient time, the ocean is changing, warming, rising, shifting faster than ever. Currents once stable are now in flux. Food chains tremble at their base. Sounds once rare, drilling, sonar, ships, pulse through the water like endless static. And yet the whales swim on, adjusting migrations, testing new grounds. inventing new calls. It's not surrender, it's improvisation. Perhaps their greatest strength is their patience. When humans look to the future, we often see urgency, but whales have always played the long game, a game measured not in years but in generations. In their world, change is not something to fear, but to ride. Even the way they reproduce is testament to this. Some whales give birth only every few years. Calves nurse for months. Social bonds last lifetimes. This isn't inefficiency, it's investment. The slow sculpting of life, not in volume but in value. Every calf is a hope shaped by millions of years of trials, each breath a continuation of a saga that began before we had words to tell it. And perhaps that's the most humbling truth of all. We did not shape the whales. They shaped the oceans before we ever dipped a toe in. They carved highways in the currents. They fertilized the seas with nutrient-rich fecal plumes. Yes, even their waste sustains ecosystems. They moved heat across the globe by traveling between poles and tropics, subtly regulating the climate long before we learned to model it on computers. They are, in every sense, the architects of their realm. And yet even now they are still evolving. What they will become in another 50 million years is unknowable. Perhaps smaller, perhaps faster. Perhaps a new species will emerge that communicates through light or touch or frequencies we cannot imagine. Or perhaps in some great irony, they will return again to the land, shuffling up some distant shore on half-formed limbs, sniffing the air with curiosity, ready for the next chapter. But for now, they remain where they've always belonged, drifting between continents, singing into the deep, carrying their history not in books or monuments, but in bone, blood, and breath. The tide is rising, and they rise with it, and so ends our journey through whale worlds, a realm not of fantasy, but of ancient truth, survival drama, and evolutionary poetry. A place where giants roam not to dominate, but to endure, where silence can be louder than a roar, and where the greatest stories are told not with words, but with waves.